Hey guys, welcome and top of the morning to you. Today we are at Aberdeen Dyce Airport in Scotland, Echo Golf Papa Delta. We're in the Bell 412 and we're sitting on pad 3 at Bristow Helicopters. In case you don't know, Bristow Helicopters offers transport to and from the offshore oil regions in the North Sea. So today I decided to take this beautiful helicopter the approximately 110 miles northeast to an oil rig called Forties Alpha. Alpha is one of several rigs in the Forties oil field, and today we're going to check out the helicopter procedures of the area around Aberdeen and Sunburg. There are several charts you might want to download from the British AIP. One of them is the chart 6-26 in the en route supplement called Helicopter Main Routes and Northern North Sea Offshore Safety Area. It gives us an overview of the main helicopter routes inbound and outbound as flown in real life. In the aerodrome charts of Aberdeen you also find two very important charts numbered 3-1 and 3-2. On here we find the helicopter route structure in vicinity of Aberdeen, depending on which runway is active at the moment, runway 16 or runway 34. Today it's going to be runway 16, we have 10 winds at 220 degrees. Here's how it works. Depending on which oil rig or oil field you want to fly to, you will intercept a certain radial of the Aberdeen VOR, which is situated approximately 10 miles north of the airport. Designator Alpha Delta November 114.30. Now before you intercept these radials, there are some for outbound flying and some for inbound flying. You will need to fly certain departure procedures along certain waypoints, which will then lead you to the main helicopter routes called Whiskey and Echo. One of these routes will be the inbound route, the other one will be the outbound route, again depending on which runway is active at Aberdeen. If you take a look at the main helicopter route chart, you can see that the Forties oil field lies approximately at a bearing of 078 degrees to 080 degrees from the Aberdeen VOR, and the helicopter main route that gets us closest to the Forties oil field runs along radial 077. The route on 080 degrees is even closer to the oil field, however as indicated by the arrow it is an inbound route, so if you want to fly from the rig back to the mainland. Now looking at the helicopter route structure chart of runway 16 of Aberdeen, we can see a dashed departure line running northeast to a waypoint called Shrub at Sierra Hotel Romeo Uniform Bravo. That's going to be our departure for today, and from Shrub we are going to intercept radial 077 degrees. I already punched in 114.30 in my nav radio, and I've already set the course on my OBS to be 077. Altimeter is 299.1, and as I mentioned before, wind is 9 to 10 knots at 220 degrees, which is rather welcome. We have a tailwind going to the rig, which will increase our ground speed. Now sometimes Aberdeen is towered, however not that often. Unfortunately it isn't towered today, so we are going to fly on VATSIM, just advising on the Unicum frequency. I think it was at the beginning of 2021 when VATSIM UK held an event at Aberdeen where you could fly all these helicopter routes with ATC at different oil rigs. Unfortunately I missed it, and since then I don't think I have seen the likes of it. However, if there should be another one, I'm in, and you should miss it as well. The helicopter routes are usually flown at altitudes between 1,500 and 9,500, and as always you would choose an odd flight level flying east and an even flight level flying west. We are going to fly at 3,000 feet today. The VFR and IFR procedures differ in the waypoints that you fly to. There are visual reporting points for VFR flying, and there are the navigational waypoints for IFR flying. I'm going to follow an IFR route today. However, technically I'm flying VFR. Just checking my switches here. I want to have full lights and the pitot heating on. Now let's quickly go over our flight plan again. I already hacked it into the GPS. Departing Aberdeen and then fly more or less direct to Shrub at 3,000 feet. and from there intercepting radial 077 of the Aberdeen VOR. Now, to make sure that I find the oil rig, I have created an individual waypoint in the GPS with the coordinates of the rig, which I found on a helideck information plate that I got from the internet. Let's see if these real-world coordinates match the position of the rig in X-Plane. I'm really not quite sure about this. I just downloaded a custom freeware scenery from the forum. It's called Oilfields UK version 1.4.0. Alright, we're ready to taxi. We are going to take off from runway Hotel 14, which is a approach and departure runway for helicopters. We're pretty heavy today, close to maximum takeoff weight, so I'm going to pull the cyclic aft quite a bit to do a frog jump start, typical of the Bell 412. I also will have the cyclic a little bit left due to the wind that is coming from the left. We're up, let's make our taxi call. Aberdeen traffic, helicopter 9 Yankee Bravo Oscar Bravo Bell 412 at Bristow, taxiing to holding point runway Hotel 14 via Charlie and Alpha, Aberdeen. These helicopter routes are very nice for IFR flying if you want to try that out. Of course you need a helicopter that has a good autopilot and IFR capabilities. If we would fly with real ATC here, we would have to get an IFR clearance, which would sound something like this. Aberdeen Tower, helicopter 9 Yankee Bravo Oscar Bravo, Bell 412 at Pad 3 Bristow with 12 POB and information Papa. Request IFR clearance to Forties Alpha via route 077. ATC answers. Helicopter 9 Yankee Bravo Oscar Bravo Aberdeen Tower, cleared to Forties Alpha via the Shrub departure route 077. Climb maintain 3000 and squawk 4730. Flying over open water, we are required to carry emergency floats. So in case of a ditching, the helicopter will stay afloat long enough for the passengers to egress the aircraft. They also use twin-engine helicopters only for redundancy reasons. However, heavily loaded as we are, whether or not the one engine in operative performance of the Bell 412 will help us in case of an engine failure is another question. More often than not, you will meet with rather poor weather conditions around the oil rigs, meaning low visibility, high winds and high seas. Depending on which kind of oil rig you're landing at, wave heights can be a factor. The rig and with it its helipad might heave in the water just like a ship, making landings even more challenging. Thankfully, we do not have to expect that in X-Plane. Alright, that's taxiway Alpha, and straight ahead is the threshold of runway Hotel 14. This is my first time flying out to the UK oil fields. As I mentioned, I just downloaded a scenery from the X-Plane forum, and I'm not really sure if that worked out and if we're actually going to find Forties Alpha, so that's going to be interesting. Now I'll set down the helicopter at the threshold of runway Hotel 14, and if we would fly with real ATC, we would have to report ready for departure and all that stuff. However, today, as we're only on the Unicum frequency in VATSIM, I'm going to do my announcement here. As you can see, we are pulling quite a bit of torque. We are just inside the continuous operation green band on the torque gauge. If we were any heavier, we would not be able to do this prolonged taxi procedure that we just did. With the torque needle in the yellow band, we have a maximum of 5 minutes before we should be in effective translational lift, or before we should reduce collective and torque. That's what a hover check is for, making sure that you can safely operate the aircraft within its power limitations. Alright, ready to go. Hotel 14, time to advise on the Unicom. Aberdeen traffic, helicopter 9 Yankee Bravo Oscar Bravo, taking off runway Hotel 14 for a left crosswind departure, climbing 3000 Aberdeen. Our mass torque needle is now in the yellow band. However, as we accelerate, you can see the needle settling back into the green area, which means continuous operation. So we're all good there. As wind from the right displaces my flight path to the left, I'm pushing in right paddle, sort of crabbing into the wind a little. Ahead is the city of Aberdeen, and we are going to initiate our turn to waypoint Shrub once we cross the River Don, right in front of us. You can see the Bridge of Don at the mouth of the River Don. That's one of the visual reporting points of Aberdeen Airport. We are supposed to overfly the coastline at 3,000 feet. Looks good so far. We should be able to make that. Now on the oil rig itself there is trained personnel establishing radio contact with you. They have to maintain a radio watch for the whole time that you are approaching the oil rig, and they will report weather information. They will not clear you to land. You as a pilot decide whether or not it's safe to land. Crossing the coastline at 3,000 feet and tracking Shrub. We have quite the tailwind. Indicated ground speed on the GPS is 150 knots. The current velocity never exceed V and E speed would be about 130 knots. Indicated airspeed is 120, so we should be good. If you should ditch the helicopter, this is of course a very serious emergency. Personnel as well as the flight crews get trained on egressing a helicopter. They usually do that in swimming pools with special devices mimicking a helicopter's fuselage capsizing in the water. Besides the actual impact, the most serious risk of course is drowning. If you should be unable to egress the helicopter, you will drown. And also with these kind of low water temperatures that you have in the North Sea, you cannot really hold your breath. If a human body is submerged into icy cold waters, there is a reflex to inhale, and that is very strong. So if you think, well, not a problem for me, I can dive for 25 meters, yes you can, but in a warm swimming pool maybe. In cold waters, this will not be possible. So some of the helicopters have breathing apparatuses available for the passengers and flight crew. Now, the helicopter transport to and from oil rigs is serious business, so there's a lot of money to be earned. And as a pilot, you will probably fly in poor weather conditions much more than you'd like. If you like offshore flying, I also recommend the Gulf of Mexico. You can actually get a helicopter flight card for that specific region free of charge on the FAA's website. This is also quite a busy airspace with helicopters. Alright, that's shrub for us. We're going to change course for Forties Alpha. I'm not really sure. I think we are on GPS mode now. I deactivated the GPS mode and put the OBS in the Bell 412 on VOR. However, it seems that Reality XP GPS sort of overrides that. I think we are flying direct Forties Alpha now. This could get us in conflict with the inbound route, radial 080. However, seeing as there's no traffic, we might be okay. Alright, we have a ground speed of 146 knots. That's not bad. Still, this leg of the flight is going to be rather boring. About 90 miles over flat ocean. So I'm going to jump ahead to the approach phase, and I'm going to see you in a bit. Alright, welcome back. Fast forward, we have 18 miles until we get to Forties Alpha, if it should be there actually. And you can see we have an overcast, so that's going to be interesting. We might ask the air traffic manager on the oil rig something like this. Echo Golf Foxtrot India 40s Alpha, helicopter 9 Yankee Bravo Oscar Bravo is 17 miles west at 3000, report weather information. Now if he would tell us that visibility is 100 meters and cloud overcast at 100 feet, we probably would abort the approach to 40s Alpha. Descending through the clouds here does pose serious risks for the helicopter. Of course, there's the possibility of loss of spatial orientation on the pilot's side, which should not be a big factor if you're flying on autopilot. However, there's also the risk of collision. You could collide with offshore wind parks, with oil rig structures, and if you fly low enough, even with the larger ships. Take a look at the GPS. Our tailwind has now increased quite a bit. We are currently flying a ground speed of 167 knots. Maybe I should have used that hole in the clouds on our right side to descend below the cloud ceiling. However, in X-Plane you cannot really rely on the visual representation of clouds, so if I would descend here, the program would probably load up clouds all around me all of a sudden. So I initiated my descent, load collective. You can see that on the torque gauge. And yeah, let's find out if Forties Alpha is where it's supposed to be. Now a simulator is pretty good for practicing flying in IMC conditions, which you would avoid in real life as a VFR pilot, but it does sometimes happen. You can practice flying by instruments only, keeping a close look on your altitude, your airspeed, your attitude, and your vertical speed. You will find it rather difficult, especially if you do not have any visual reference anymore, which will be the case once we enter these clouds. This also holds true for real-life aviation. It is one of the most dangerous things to enter instrument meteorological conditions if you don't have an autopilot, since you cannot rely on your senses, and losing spatial orientation is just a blink away. Infamous examples of accidents in IMC conditions are numerous. Just to name a few, think of the helicopter accident that killed basketball star Kobe Bryant, the accident of JFK Jr. on approach to Nantucket Island, and the crash of Air France 447. The latter accident, of course, having had numerous causes. The main one probably was the complete loss of spatial orientation and situational awareness by the flight crew. You can see the effects of low visibility. I'm veering off course to the right here. I try to correct for that. However, at the same time, I'm getting a little bit fast. We're at 130 knots, which is pretty close to V and E speed for this helicopter. Again, getting really fast here. Probably want to get below that cloud ceiling. However, I should have reduced my speed before starting the approach.
Caution, obstacle, obstacle.
Now the ground proximity warning system activates, so there seems to be something there. You can see the oil rig on our 10 o'clock position just passing by. Cloud ceiling is rather low at 800 feet, so we have to reverse our direction of flight, slow down, and approach the helipad. Now, usually helidecs on oil rigs are only accessible from certain directions or sectors due to cranes and derricks that you want to keep well clear of. On the helideck information plate for Forties Alpha, it is indicated that we should approach the helipad from the northeast roughly. However, it is very unlikely that the oil rig that we see in X-Plane is an exact replica of the real thing.
Caution, terrain, terrain. Caution, terrain, terrain. Warning, terrain, terrain. Warning, terrain, terrain. Warning, terrain, terrain.
Being as heavy as we are, you probably would not want to get into an out-of-ground effect hover on approach. Interestingly enough, you can see that our torque rating is very low. Also, the airspeed indicates about 30 knots, and we are sort of stationary in the air, so it must mean that we have very high winds here. The helideck, according to the chart, is at an elevation of 162 feet. The oil rig itself is 303 feet high. Looks about right.
Caution, terrain, terrain.
Just inhibited the ground proximity warning system for now. Again, notice the difference between indicated airspeed and ground speed. It's 90 knots versus 56 knots, indicating a headwind of 20 to 30 knots.
200.
Now that headwind will give us additional lift, however it might also make the landing quite challenging. Doesn't seem to be gusting or to be turbulent, but that's probably something you can expect out there on the North Sea. You can also expect quite a lot of turbulence around the oil rig itself, the wind being forced around the structures of the rig, and sometimes even sudden changes in air temperature should there be any hot gases being emitted by the machinery. You can see the rig has two cranes, which are animated, so they move, so we better be careful not to fly into them. So if you wonder why I don't get any closer or why our approach is so slow, as I just realized, our ground speed is at 8 knots slowing down, even though we have an indicated airspeed of over 40 knots. Now in real life you would go for a rather fast approach, slowing down the helicopter to come to a complete stop, sort of directly over the helipad. But with the high winds in X-Plane here, we do have excellent control of the helicopter. We also don't seem to have any power problems at all. Realistically, simulating wind systems is very complex and probably beyond the scope of any commercial helicopter or flight simulator. It isn't too bad on X-Plane, however. It also depends on how your aircraft, especially the helicopter flight model of X-Plane, reacts to these winds and turbulences. And I think that most of the time it seems to be a little bit exaggerated. only visual references that I get are sort of very close to the helicopter. They're the structures of the oil rig, so it can be quite difficult to hover above or land on a heli deck at an oil platform. The Bell 412 is a big machine, so I'm trying to move a little bit forward. I'm trying to land in the center of the pad. Whoops. And we're down. We found Forties Alpha, and it was a successful landing, even though the approach was probably not done by the book. Alrighty, that concludes our little offshore experience. Hope you enjoyed it. Maybe you want to try out these helicopter routes for yourself. And I hope to see you around next time.